Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. We'll let people join. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to give it a minute to let people come on. It's just a couple minutes after 7. Hope everybody had a good February break. Okay, I think we will get started. So welcome, everybody. I appreciate you joining us tonight, our first day back from break, and with this impending snowstorm. We really appreciate everybody taking the time for this really important conversation. My name is Nyla Bolas. I am a parent of 3 children who have gone through the Newton schools, including 2 seniors who are graduating this spring. And I am also part of the planning group for FORJ, Families Organizing for Racial Justice at Newton North High School, which is co-hosting this conversation tonight. And if you don't know about FORJ at Newton North, we are a community that brings together parents and guardians and teachers and students to create a stronger network of support for racial justice throughout really all aspects of our high school. We've hosted a number of programs and events. Many of you have probably attended them. We have done some in partnership with Newton South, like we are doing tonight. And our programs and events are really intended to increase our collective understanding of issues of racism and racial justice and their implications for our schools, and also to strengthen our partnerships, both within our school committees and then external to our high school communities. And tonight's panel is an opportunity to continue conversations that we've been having in our community about educational excellence, and specifically to dig a little bit deeper into the relationship between equity and excellence. The commitment of our school district is to educate, prepare, and inspire all students, and I emphasize all students, to achieve their full potential as lifelong learners and thinkers and productive contributors to our global society. And I will say as a parent that that's a commitment that I really value. I can speak a little bit from my own personal experience as a parent of 3 students who have been enrolled really in a wide range of classes at varied levels, including multi-level classes, advanced placement, and everything in between. And when I've seen my children most excited about their learning is when they've really been challenged by complex situations and they've had to apply their learning to make sense of what's happening in the world around them. Or we've had lots of dinner conversations when they have shared with me about opportunities they've had to work in a group of diverse students and think really critically about how to solve a problem together. My husband and I have often joked that we'd like to go back to high school at Newton North because we've seen that our kids have had such an incredibly rich opportunity to take so many interesting classes and to really deepen their knowledge across multiple disciplines. And I know one of the data points that the school looks at is acceptance into colleges of choice. And while the responses are still coming in for my seniors, we already know and can share that all 3 of my kids have been accepted to at least one of their top 3 colleges. I know that's one of the data points that the school looks at. And my oldest child, who's now a senior in college, has very often said that she felt really prepared by her education at Newton North for the rigor and the challenges of her college courses. So that's a perspective of one parent. We're going to hear a number of other perspectives tonight. And it's really, I think, an opportune time for us to have this conversation because we are in many ways at a, I would say, pivotal point for education in our community as we're continuing to understand more deeply the impacts of the pandemic particularly with respect to the inequities that existed prior to the pandemic. And we now also, as of last week's announcement or the week before, we have new leadership in our district. So it's a really important time that we come together and examine these topics. And to lead our conversation, we are very lucky to have a panel of experts from both Newton South and North. We have our two principals and teachers and students, and they will have a conversation responding to questions that were submitted previously via the RSVP form from many of you. But if you'd like to ask a question of the panel during the conversation, you can do that using the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. So I'm going to turn it over to Principal Turner of Newton North and Principal Stras of Newton South. Both, as you all know, they both have extensive expertise in instructional practice. They're experienced high school administrators and teachers with a deep commitment to excellence for all of our students. And we are incredibly fortunate to have their leadership in general and their participation tonight. So thank you both, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nyla. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Tammy Stras. I am the principal of Newton South. I also wanted to welcome our panelists today, and I'm going to ask my team at South to introduce themselves, and then the team at North will go after. So welcome and thank you for being here. Jerry, would you like to start?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. I'm Jerry Gagnon. I'm the Department Chair of Science, Tech Ed, and Engineering at Newton South, and this work is exceptionally important to me as well. Thanks. And I'll pass it to Mark Banks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Banks. I am one of the deans at Newton South, also an English teacher, and I will pass it off to Alex Krause.
Hi, my name is Alex Krause, he, him, his, and I'm the Math and Computer Science Chair at Newton South.
Great. Thank you, Newton South. I also wanted to say hello and welcome. I'm glad that we are putting on this event with our partners at Newton South and FORJ Newton North, and I will pass it off to my colleagues at Newton North. Start with Derek.
Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Knapp. I'll pass it off to Kanchan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kanchan Kant. I am a math teacher. I teach sophomore math and computer programming, and I'm also the assistant department head for the math department. Maya, I think it's you next.
I'm Maya Varma-Wilson. I'm a senior at Newton North, and I don't know if there's anyone left.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay now? Okay. So our first question is, how do you define equity and excellence? And do you believe they are linked terms? Kanchan, would you like to go first?
Sure. So for me, equity means that each student, each child receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. And I think as a district, as a school, we strongly believe in equally high outcomes for all our students. So that's how equity and excellence are connected to each other. And at the same time, just to think I have been focusing on what excellence means and what it means for me, what it means for students, what it means for different students. And I think there is some unlearning that we need to do when it comes to the definition of excellence, because we have had historically, we have had one definition of what excellence means for everybody. We say one size fits all, and this is what excellence is for all students. But that's not true, in my opinion, because every student, every person can define excellence in their own way. For somebody, it's getting into an Ivy League school, and for somebody else, it's graduating high school. So just like thinking about what excellence means and how it's defined differently for different people, and giving kids an opportunity and access to be able to learn from each other, to have diverse perspectives, and to be able to go out into the world where they can collaborate, where they can hold multiple truths. They can work with different people from different backgrounds, not just like race, gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation, but also different perspectives, different experiences. So to make sure that like we are preparing students for that world outside of high school, I believe like excellence and equity has to exist together. And I mean, that's how I would define equity alongside with excellence, where they go hand in hand, where one cannot exist without the other.
Others?
That was great, Kanchan. Thank you very much. I don't have anything to add to the definitions, but I do want to just sort of emphasize that much of what Kanchan just said is something that I've been reflecting on myself in the last few years, and sort of just realizing that part of this focus on excellence as defined by Kanchan has led me to be more mindful of my own instruction and my own thoughts on what my expectations are for my students and what it is that I've sort of always wanted from my students. And so that kind of self-reflection is then also what I encourage in my students as well as part of the process. And so introducing to them ideas or opportunities for them to think about their own progress and efforts, and ultimately to fit to the question, their ability to achieve excellence. And so in that sense, equity then really kind of goes hand in hand, as Kanchan said, this idea of equal access to achieving that excellence. And so for me, providing opportunities for my students, all of my students, to have that opportunity to achieve that definition. So I think they are absolutely linked, in that way.
Great, thank you. And then as a follow-up, just thinking about our schools at Newton North and Newton South, what do equity and excellence look like in our high schools?
I can start with this one. I think
Go ahead.
definitely support for people's different needs, students' different needs. I think that this year or last year introducing Win Block is something that's really been a step in that direction, because students are able to, within the school day, get support for each of their different classes. And then things like peer tutoring, obviously are very helpful. Also the DLS program at Newton North, Dover Legacy Scholars for Hispanic, Latino, and Black students, is also really pushing the idea of equity, because like historically disadvantaged students are given the opportunity to further their own excellence with support from their mentors and staff at Newton North. So different programs that we have at North, as well as things that are just built into the school day, really help each student kind of achieve their own goals.
Thank you, Maya. And I think for me, put simply, it's about choice. And so again, in reflecting on that idea of excellence, I've started to sort of divide my focus between content and method. And so if my focus is on developing students' understanding around content, like my learning objectives are content based, demonstrating an understanding of something that we've read or something that we're learning, then they'll have choice around how they demonstrate that content. And it might be something in writing, but it might be an oral explanation of something. It might be a visual explanation of something, as long as it's just demonstrating content. And that might, that demonstrates a close reading of the text, that demonstrates their ability to articulate a thought that they have traced throughout the reading or what have you. If my focus then is on method, then let's say my focus is on teaching them writing, then that is what they have to produce. They have to produce something written, but then what they're writing about they would have choice around that. So I'm teaching, I teach AP language and composition, so they have to write an argument. And so I'm teaching them the structure of how to write this argument, how to supply evidence and concrete evidence and sustain that argument throughout their piece. But the topic that they have chosen is up to them. And so it's something that's passionate for them and relatable for them. And so what equity and excellence looks like, to just tie it back to this question, I have realized that this idea of sort of a fluidity and excellence, that it looks different in different situations. And so as long as students are conveying to me what it is that is our set objective, that choice, that ability of theirs to convey that idea can vary. And I think that has been something that I've been focusing on lately.
I'll jump in. Thanks, Derek. I'll echo a lot of what Derek and Maya both mentioned in terms of that UDL piece being some way that we can build better on-ramps for more students to access and for more students to really be able to learn and grow effectively. Similar to what Maya mentioned, at North, we have a program called the Legacy Scholars at South, again, for our Black and Brown students, our African-American and Latina students who have already achieved and have done well, and we want to make sure that we're supporting that. In terms of the educational practices that Derek was talking about in universal design for learning within UDL, we really want to make sure that we are trying to build in as many different opportunities for students to be intrinsically motivated, to show relevance, to use some project-based learning, et cetera. So that's critically important. And I know that Mark Banks mentioned that I should also point to the Da Vinci program, the global communities program, and the new media programs, where students do get to navigate in smaller cohorts within multiple levels, which we're going to talk about shortly. But they get to self-select into those programs, and they get to kind of learn in a slightly different way, depending on which one of those programs they want to do or not. And again, we're trying to meet kids where they are and bring them along and giving them lots of different ways to show that mastery within the new media program, rather than maybe writing a 5-paragraph expository. They might produce a short podcast on something. And within Da Vinci, rather than sitting for a pencil and paper test in chemistry, they might build an artistic model of a molecule. And so there's lots of different ways that we can give kids those opportunities to really show that they have mastered and owned that material and gotten to a high level of competency.
Great, thank you, everyone. So just continuing our conversation on equity and excellence, what cultural values do we wish we could shift so that more people in our community in Newton understood that equity and excellence really do belong together? Alex, if you're okay starting this one.
Sure. I think that a lot of this actually hinges on some of the issues that Kanchan had raised. And can you not hear me? I'm getting ear. Okay. I will just let to all the people out there, if I cut out, I apologize. I'm getting memories of Zoom days when we were all remote and it's saying my internet is unstable. So just as a heads up, what I was saying, that I'm not sure how much it got caught, was a lot of this sort of hinges on some of the issues that Kanchan was raising earlier about whether we have about thinking about how narrow or how broad our view of excellence can be. But moreover, I think if I was to change just one thing, I think it would be the notion that these are mutually some game, and that if we increase excellence for some, that must inherently be reducing it for others. I fundamentally don't believe that to be true, and wish that was a way that we could look at all of it. I think that full disclosure, I grew up in Newton and I've been working in NPS for almost 20 years. Newton has a very competitive spirit, and I think there are some really wonderful things that come from that. But there are also places where it plays a role in ways that I think maybe are not as appropriate. And mostly I wish it didn't manifest in the way we view our students' access to education. Like if we were to give everybody on an athletic team better access to training, we would assume that the whole team performs better. I think if we look at education in a similar fashion, if we give everybody the access to the most to those educational resources, then really we're going to improve and strengthen the educational experience for all of our students.
And I can piggyback on that just briefly. Alex, you mentioned a lot of things that I was going to say as well. I think instilling curiosity in students, being kind of like that, being the stepping off point, is going to be really important. Our students are going to be going on and navigating diverse places, diverse workplaces, and diverse settings for them to live and to learn in the future. And we want to make sure that they have the soft skills, the interpersonal skills to be able to do that. We're not preparing anybody if we get through chapters 1 through 30 and we don't give anybody the opportunity to kind of flex on like how they did that learning, because the information is cheap. We know that in our current society, information is getting less and less and less valuable. So it's not about what you know, it's what you can do and how you can go get that information as you need it. So for me, that's like the magic wand culturally that I think the community probably understands at some level, but I think that we could kind of lean into that a little bit more and try to recognize that that's how we get to excellence. It's not whether you've memorized the periodic table. It's whether you can understand like why they go together and how we can propose what are the next steps, what are the higher order ideas that we can get to.
Adding on to that, like I was just thinking about that too. And like one thing that I would personally would like a shift is like education or different contents don't exist in vacuum. So like physics and math, they work together so well. Computer programming, I mean, I teach one of the courses of computer programming. There is so much application of so many different content areas in that. And then there are like writing and data science involved together. Like there are so many ways, so many disciplines are intertwined, but we are used to doing one class at a time differently. And that doesn't align with the higher order thinking skills. That doesn't align very well with the excellence. So whenever we get a chance, whenever we can, when we do interdisciplinary stuff, when we do things, when we do projects, when we do assignments, when we do assessments, where students can bring in more than just that subject, more than like just what the content they've learned, but actually apply it in some way. That is when I think we are actually showing excellence.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question, which like Kanchan was just talking about in terms of showing excellence. Our next question is how do we explain excellence and equity to students, and then how are students experiencing it? So I'm wondering, Maya, if you could get us started on how are you as a student experiencing all of this that we're talking about?
Yeah, so kind of adding on to what Mr. Krause was saying about equity and like the sports team analogy, giving everyone on the sports team the same amount of training, everyone goes to the same practices, everything, that's equality. And equity is giving the injured player or someone who had an off game extra training or extra help to get to the same point where their teammates are. And I think that's a really important distinction to make between equality and equity. And kind of going back to what I was saying with like win block and just extra meetings with teachers, whatever each individual student needs, I feel like North at least definitely has the support that any student could need. I know that last year I went to every Wednesday, I went to my math teacher's win block so that I could keep up with what we were doing, understand each unit. And I think that all students have that opportunity because win's built into the day. And then with excellence, I think like Ms. Kant was saying, excellence is more subjective, it's more individual to each student. I think there's, at least from a student perspective, a lot of times excellence is kind of focused on like your GPA, your SAT score, or where you end up going after high school. And while that is a definition of excellence, that might be someone's goal to get to this specific school or have this GPA. It's not for everybody, and excellence could be defined as I raised $100 with my club during this fundraiser, or I made this sports team, or I got this role in the musical. And I think that because North and South have such diverse class offerings and extracurricular offerings, each student is able to get to whatever their definition of excellence is, and the school's way of supporting them on that journey to whatever point they're trying to get to. I think that there's always a lot of support built in.
Why do I have to follow that? Thank you, Maya. One of the things that you said that really kind of stuck out to me with the way I was going to frame it is this idea of contextualizing excellence. That, you know, whereas as you were saying, you know, the education system has a built-in sort of definition of excellence, you know, around GPA and such, but moving away from that as much as possible to try to sort of contextualize what excellence might look like. So for me, it's been about trying to be as transparent as I can with laying out in front of them, here's what it is that I expect you to learn in this class as a whole, but let's say just in this unit or even on this assignment, front loading them, like here are the objectives that you're trying to achieve. So as we are practicing this, and then as you're trying it out, and as you're doing a final thing, like this is what we're moving towards, and so this is what I'm going to be measuring you up against. So excellence will be achieving these, meeting these learning objectives. So a concrete example would be around like the writing process. We've done a lot of work in the last year or two to build the revision process into the writing process. So whereas in the past, it might be something that is kind of tacked on after the fact, after the grade, that some students would take advantage of, making it a part of the writing process. So teaching the skills, practicing, you know, outlining, going through the drafting, creating a rough draft, providing feedback on that, and then they revise it from that feedback and other work that we've been doing in class. I'll provide models to show them what effective writing looks like. I'll provide them models of kind of middle range writing, and then we'll kind of revise it and work on it together to improve it, to show them how to achieve excellence in this regard. And then ultimately they'll turn in a final draft. And again, because of the system that we're in, that ends up ultimately getting a grade. But throughout that process, we're working to make the grade, the thing that is an indication of what it is that they're trying to achieve, motivational, because they see what that grade means. If they earn the A on it, the B on it, they understand that means they've achieved some of these objectives, but not others, or they've exceeded some of these objectives and met others as well. So it's about making it more transparent and in an effort to help students understand clearly what excellence looks like. And the equity, it's not so much that I explain it, but I show it instead is through things that we do in class to kind of give them access, help them achieve those learning goals.
Thank you so much, Derek. Alex, you are not the only one experiencing internet issues. Dr. Turner just got kicked off. He will be back in a couple minutes. So our next question is, what is NPS doing to move away from a systemic white-centered learning environment to a more humanistic one? Kanchan, would you like to get us started?
Sure. I mean, I think as a school, we are doing a lot of work around building relationships and the importance of building relationships with students and looking at them and seeing them as humans, as like a full human, not just like a grade on a piece of paper. Like I can talk more personally when it comes to my classes. All my classes, I teach sophomore math, multi-level honors and accelerated, and computer science principles. And all of my classes start with like, oh, let's take 5 human minutes. We'll just talk to each other. We won't look at our phones. We won't look at our Chromebooks. We won't do a warm-up problem. We will just hang out and we'll just talk. We need to transition from one class to the other. It also looks like giving choice to students. It could be like doing an art project in math where everyone gets to show something they're passionate about using the functions that we have learned. Or it could be something like when everybody's working on whiteboards and I can go around and help and see what each person needs and give them the help or give them the support that they need. So like it looks different in a lot of different ways. For me, like, other than the classroom, it also looks like our programs like the calculus project. Dr. Turner and I have a calculus project advisory, and we have an amazing, a beautiful relationship with all of those 25 kids. Like they don't just see me for 20 minutes in a week, they come and hang out with me, they come and find me, they come actually talk to me about their lives. And I can help them navigate the school, I can help them navigate what courses to take next year and so on and so forth. So like seeing them as human beings and not just a student in my classroom. I think the more and more educators are doing that, and the more we do that, the more humanistic we are being.
Would anybody like to add to that? Derek, would you like to add to that?
I can wait if somebody else was wanting to chime in. I was just going to, again, add on to what Kanchan said there. The idea of relationships and the idea of kind of humanizing what goes on in the classroom. There's a couple sort of points to that I can elaborate on. One is, as Kanchan mentioned, the idea that of getting away from this kind of one size fits all of what either expectations might look like, or even my methodology for what I do in the classroom or what I bring in the classroom. So as an example, last year, or for the past few years, I've taught a senior English course, the history, culture, and art of hip hop. And as somebody who is not deeply immersed in the culture of hip hop, or at least hasn't been since the 1990s, you know, I don't bring the same level of intimacy and knowledge to that subject as my students do, or as many of my students do. And so an assignment that I did with them was creating this kind of resource archive where they were studying the culture surrounding hip hop, and I would give them various topics, the economics of it, cultural appropriation, what have you, and they would go out and do research and find sources that they felt spoke to that topic and that they thought, you know, others would be interested in learning about, or that they themselves were passionate about. And then we kind of created this archive and then used those as the foundation for our course of study. So that puts me in the role of sitting amongst them, reading these sources and learning from these sources, and turning to the students who provided these sources to sort of deepen our understanding of it, and listening to other sources, other students kind of contribute to that discussion about this, because they'll say, oh, that reminds me of this other situation, and they'll bring in a source about that. And oftentimes they're talking about kind of cultural or culturally relevant moments that I might myself be ignorant of, and so I'm asking them questions. And so it really kind of decenters me as the teacher and puts the onus on them, which then also helps them realize that they can, that they matter in that sense, that what they know and what they, their experience is, matters. Similarly, again, this idea of writing is a process and revision is part of that process that allows students to make mistakes, that allows them to struggle through the writing process, ask questions, get feedback. Peer-to-peer conversations around the writing become a little bit more authentic because it takes away some of that competitiveness. They write a rough draft. I provide feedback on that rough draft. They tried something, that it allows them to experiment in their writing, to try things because they know there's not a grade attached to that early draft, to those early efforts. So it really, again, to Kanchan's point, becomes a more humanistic experience because we all make mistakes and we're struggling and we're learning and from that. And so it becomes, again, a conversation. Maya has mentioned win blocks. Those win blocks are a great opportunity then for me to have those further conversations one-on-one with students about their work. So really sort of making it, decentering me and making it about what students can kind of bring to the course as a whole, but also to that one-on-one conversation about the ideas that they're wanting to write about, let's say.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me better now. We're gonna move to, there's a question from the RSVP list on multi-level classes, and now we're not going to spend the entire block here on multi-level classes, but we're gonna give it a mention. I will give a shout out to a presentation that the department chairs at Newton North gave a couple of weeks ago that really went in depth about the rationale behind it, the research behind it, and I think that would give you a longer amount of information of our work around multi-level classes, but we're going to touch upon it here. And the questions are, what are multi-level classes? Do you gather data to see if you achieved your objectives using multi-level classes? What are the advantages and disadvantages of multi-level classes? Alex, do you want to go first? You're muted.
I'm really hearkening back to our old Zoom days today. I mean, multi-level classes at a core are heterogeneous groupings of students who are working to achieve common learning objectives with potentially different access points or in different levels of, at least in mathematics, often different levels of depth or complexity with which they are studying a particular learning objective or concept. That probably sounded really jargony, but it's a bunch of kids together in a class learning together. And I want to put that sort of front and center. I do, just from an administrative point of view, want to also address the data collection. And though we don't have controlled studies at this point, because any data that we're collecting now is not going to, where there are too many confounding variables. And yes, I probably sound like a math and science person. We did an exit survey for our students in multi-class level classes last year to gauge their experience. Multi-level class. And we also were looking at summative assessment data. Frankly, we were looking at common assessments across all of our multi-level classes to make sure that we were still meeting the expectations for excellence that we have and meeting the learning objectives that we set out for those classes. And I'm pleased to report that in all of those cases, both of the student survey data suggested that those were very positive experiences for every student we polled, as well as our summative assessment data showed that we were doing a great job meeting our learning objectives in all of those courses.
Great, thank you. Maya, I think people would love to hear a student's perspective on multi-level classes.
Yeah, so I'm in mostly AP and honors classes this year, and I was last year. Mostly last year and sophomore year, my honors classes were multi-level. I'm in a multi-level English class this year. And I think as you kind of go through the years, as you get into more honors and AP classes, your group of classmates kind of starts dwindling a little bit, and you start ending up with many of the same people in your classes. So from A to B block, B to C block, I see a lot of the same faces. And I think that having a more diverse group of people, not only in terms of like race and socioeconomic backgrounds, but just in terms of people and perspectives, I have much more rich conversations in my multi-level classes, because people are coming in with a variety of backgrounds and perspectives and thoughts and ideas that I generally don't hear in my other classes. So I'd say that my multi-level classes are like a different experience than my singular level classes. I will say multi-level classes, they're an adjustment, mostly for me just because they were a newer thing at the time that I got into them. Now I'm used to them and I really look forward to going to those.
Great, thanks. And Kanchan, there were a lot of questions at our last session around math. And does it work in a math class? And so maybe you could speak to that. Particularly the idea of equity and excellence.
Yeah, sure. So, so math classes, we have multi-level classes in math in as a freshman and in sophomores. So we have CPA, CP, and Accelerated Honors at North, which are 2 multi-level classes. Students in those classes are designated those levels. It's not that everybody is one level or like we are a heterogeneous group. Kids know which level they are signed up for, and teachers know what level they are signed up for. But the idea is increasing the opportunity and access for all students, giving them the diverse perspective that Maya talks about, showing them teaching them how to work with different people and what excellence would mean when we have to work with different kinds of people. So it doesn't mean that an honors kid would do this work and an accelerated kid would do that work, or the assessments are going to look different. So like very recently, I did an assessment where everybody was going to do the same thing. They were going to I was having them make a face on Desmos, but they were making that same face, but accelerated students could use up to 12 equations to do it, and honors could only do it with 10. So adding that layer of rigor in that same setup, in that same class, in that same environment, but giving the students what they need, like giving them that extension, giving them the support, and showing them that, yes, everybody can learn from everyone. Everyone has something to contribute and everyone can learn from everyone. Like that, to me, is the equity and the excellence working together and increasing the opportunity for all students. So, and I was looking at some data just today as part of our like next department meeting and stuff. The number of students who are taking classes at the honors level in the past 10 years have doubled at all grade levels. So have almost doubled at all grade levels, including APs. So from freshmen to APs, we have almost doubled the number of students who are taking honors classes in math. So even though I am teaching 2 sections of accelerated honors, like multi-level class, the majority of my students have signed up for that class as an honors student. So like, yeah.
Thank you.
And Henry, can I jump in from a dean perspective? I want to say
Please.
that you know, at South, I imagine the same at North too. With the multi-level classes, with something like Global, which we've had for a very long time, but with the addition of new media communities and Da Vinci, what I've heard from students is students who would typically be in, let's say, a CP only class or an ACP only class, when they have access to the next level and realizing that, oh, wait, I can do the ACP work, or, oh, I can do the honors work. I've had many more conversations, especially with the addition of Da Vinci and new media in the last couple of years, of students being like, I didn't realize that I can do that level work. And so just having that access to opportunity, as everyone is talking about, that is so key for the students. And that's where that equity piece comes in. And then as a result, there is excellence because they are doing well. And for them, that is the broadened definition of, oh, I can make this work. So from a dean's perspective, I will say it's anecdotal. I wish I were a math teacher. I'm an English teacher, but I can absolutely say that I've had many more conversations about, I didn't know I could do that, and now I do want to do ACP, or now I do want to do honors. So it's created an opportunity that just was not there before.
And just to jump in and remove the systemic barriers for kids to be able to make those choices on their own without blowing up their schedule, without leaving their established classroom communities.
Great. Thank you all.
If I could just,
Yeah,
one
go
last
ahead.
thing to add,
Go ahead.
like what it really just comes down to is, we're increasing skill instruction, interventions for improvement on skills so that more students can achieve excellence, so that more students can achieve at that higher level, rather than the false narrative that we are lowering the bar, decreasing the standard of excellence. So now, as Kanchan said, well, the false narrative is, of course, there's more students taking honors classes because you've made it easier, you've lowered that bar. And in fact, opposite is happening. The bar is staying up here and can get higher, but we're increasing the numbers because of that focus to decrease the removing barriers, all these things that have been said, but increasing instruction of the necessary skills to achieve at that level.
All right. Thank you. So we have time for one more question from that were sent to us before, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have questions, please post it in the Q&A section there. And I do want to just acknowledge is that when we think about equity, we think about different pathways so that students can meet those high expectations and reach that excellence. And we also acknowledge that not every student is meeting that high bar for us. And so we need to think about what are some other ways what are we doing to support those students who are underperforming or not reaching our high expectations. So I want us to kind of think about that, but also this last question came from around the NPS value of anti-racist. And that's been a statement that goes all the way back to the Erwin Blummer days, that Newton was an anti-racist district, one of the first in the country in the 1990s. And so I'm wondering if people can just respond, what does that raising anti-racist student mean to you, and how does it relate to Newton Public Schools?
I can start. So I think it's important to distinguish between students that aren't racist and students that are anti-racist. And it looks different for different students. For white students, it's usually first acknowledging their privilege as a white person. And then for students of color, it's kind of understanding racism might have affected your life, affected the lives of people around you, or the ways that it could be internalized. And then beyond that, actively taking opportunities or participating in opportunities to kind of further your understanding of anti-racist practices, like how racism functions, not only like in the country, but also like in our smaller communities. And also on a much smaller level, just like identifying and speaking out against racism in your everyday life, which is something really common, like microaggressions with high school students. Your friend might say something that's kind of weird, and being anti-racist would be pointing that out and helping to teach them why that's wrong. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Mark, do you want to go next?
Yeah, at South, one of the things I'm really proud of in terms of our anti-racist work is our work on courageous conversations, which we've started to really broaden, and been doing that work with Jerry, as well as a couple of other people. And we started with courageous conversations on race, what, Jerry, 8 years ago or something like that. And so it really has expanded, and it's an opportunity for students to courageously talk about race. And so having those conversations are so important in a structured environment, and those conversations are actually led by students. The curriculum was created by students, delivered by students. We help sort of modify it a little bit, but they're giving us the ideas. And then as a result, we've also sort of now in the 9th grade, so that's the 10th graders, and now to 9th graders, we have our courageous conversations on identity. And it's great because it's sort of, if you're going to talk about race, we thought it's really important to understand who am I and where do I come from. And so in the 9th grade, they do courageous conversations on identity. And in the 10th grade, they do courageous conversations on race. And so that work at South is awesome and important. And it's the students lead it and facilitate it. And that's the work that I want to see continue. Because if you're going to be a global citizen, you're going to have to understand where you're coming from and understanding your own biases. But then being willing to sort of sit in the discomfort, one of our core values in courageous conversations, and understanding people are going to bring multiple realities and understanding that that's okay, right? And so it's not about solving racism, but it's being able to understand and acknowledge it.
Okay. So I think we're going to take some of your questions, people who are on the webinar right now. Madeline and Katania, I think you're going to help us with this piece.
Sure, I can read one out loud. They're in the
Thank you.
chat. Tanya, I'm going to start with the one that you put in the chat. If that's all
Okay.
right.
You want me to read it then?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so from a participant, they said they're very glad to hear of the Legacy Scholar programs at the schools and other academic supports. However, one of the biggest challenges for students of color is cultural acclimation. So how do the schools help students, they said, ameliorate or lessen the harm of campus climate outside or in addition to academics? So we have academic supports, but what else are we doing?
Mr. Banks, you want to start with that one as a dean?
Yeah, sure. As a dean, and at South, once again, we have many affinity groups and clubs, and I think those are so important to the culture of South, and for students to be in a space where they feel like they can talk freely and be with people who understand them. And so one of the things in Courageous Conversations is that we also talk about the fact that we have so many affinity groups, and that you don't necessarily have to be a member of that affinity group to go to that affinity group. But I think it's very important for students of color to have that space that they can do that. So that is sort of one of our biggest values at South. I imagine it's the same at North as well.
If I can actually jump in here, just speaking from experience, when I interviewed at South, my last interview was in the building. And from the minute I walked in the building, I knew exactly what South was about in terms of culture, right? Because all over our building, our values and who we are and what we believe in are on display. And we are very, very, very proud of that. And I came from an educational building in an educational district that the values that they had did not necessarily align with mine. But when I actually did my second interview at North and then my finalist interview at South. When I walked into both buildings, those values are on display, and it tells you who we are, and it doesn't make excuses for that. And I think for me, that is extremely important. So if you're talking about climate and culture, it's everywhere, including what you can actually see.
I would just jump into and just echo what Mark was saying about affinity groups. I think FORJ did an event last year, I think it was last year, on affinity groups. So that last year or 2 years ago. I think some of the special conversations I see, most special conversations I see happening are in our affinity groups, because they are open to all students. And so students of different races in our our BLSC Black Leadership Advisory Council engaging in conversations about race in our schools. Same with our Asian Culture Club, that students are engaging and then supporting each other. Our cultural events are a huge component of our school. We just had BLAC Day the week before vacation. It's a great way for students to learn about the experiences of people in our building, in our community. And I think as our school is becoming more diverse, so when I started, Newton North was about, I think, 65% white, and now we are under 60% white. So our school is more diverse. years later. And I think that as we see that, we need to think of different ways of supporting that diversity. And I think our culture days, our affinity groups are two really important components to it, as well as our academic ways that we support students.
I'll add
You wanna-
on really
go ahead.
quickly.
Yeah, please.
I think as a student, there's kind of a worry if you're having issues with cultural acclimation that the adults in the building don't see that, or nobody really knows that. And at North, we have the Human Rights Council, which is a student-led student council basically. And the benefit of that is that you have students raising issues that they've seen or that they've experienced in the building, and then adults supporting those students in coming up with ways to combat that. And then, like Dr. Turner was saying about the affinity groups and our culture days, I've participated in a bunch of student panels on various culture days and things like that in the past. And I think in addition to everyone in the audience hearing what you have to say, as a student being on those panels, it really makes you feel heard and like you're being able to express yourself and your experiences to your peers, which is really helpful when you feel like you've had really different experiences from your peers.
Great, thank you. We want to take one more and then we'll pass it to Jacqueline.
Connie, let's do this last one about,
Go for it.
okay. So, from a participant, very glad to, learn more about the Dover Legacy Program and just that it exists. What options are in the works for students who are performing on other levels than what the Dover Legacy Scholar Program requires?
So I can give a little background of the Dover Legacy Scholars and the legacy, and I think this is true, the Legacy Scholars as well, is that it was designed to address a stereotype threat in the false stereotype that Black and brown students don't care about school. And so so the idea was to build up a culture to demonstrate to other Black and brown students that it is that there is a vibrant culture that's highly academic in our schools, and to show the rest of the school that. So when I started 7 years ago, we had 12 students in DLS. Now we have 100 students in DLS. And so I think one of the ways in which we support students who are would not be in would not qualify for DLS, which would be students who are in college prep, for example, is that we have this bar for them to stretch and to support them. And our multi-level classes is one of the ways in which they can see the access for them to maybe stretching themselves and taking a more rigorous course. So I think that that's one way that we support them, and we support them in the classroom and outside of the classroom to reach those goals. The other way I sort of interpret the question, because I'm not sure what the question meant about different levels, but is celebrating student growth and improvement. And I think those are some of the things that we're talking about around assessment and grading. Is a student who grasps a concept in September, what makes them any smarter than a student who grasps it in November, right? And so honoring that a student who grows and improves over the course of the year should be rewarded for that. And I think that families at the high schools may know that there's a lot more teachers who are doing makeup assessments for students, so students can demonstrate their knowledge. And I think that we found that to be really successful. So I think it's praising the improvement that we're seeing for students, and then keeping that high bar for them that programs like DLS have. So Kanchan and Jerry wanted to chime in on that.
I just wanted to add the piece where we as a school and as our department and as a district are also working to in ways that we help and support these students through our intervention programs, through peer tutoring, through actually working on ourselves and our own instructional practices to help students achieve at the highest levels, and looking at our own biases, looking at the opportunity gap and data as in like which group of students are not accessing like higher level classes, or where is the gap? Why are we seeing so many what is the difference? Is there a gender spread? Is there a racial spread? Is there something else? Like right now in my computer programming class, out of 25, I have 4 girls, which is sad to me in so many different ways. So, but that's something that is a data point for us to analyze and think about what to do to motivate more girls to get to like pursue computer programming, and to think of why they're not doing it. So like that piece as educators that we're working on ourselves to help support more students achieve at the highest level is also another way I feel like that we are working towards that part.
And I'll just piggyback on one thing that Henry said, and that is that at South within the Legacy program, one of the things that we've been trying to do lately is to ask our Legacy scholars to mentor kids in the lower grades, 9th and 10th grade. Legacy scholars to the elementary school, to really make sure that those kids do have the clarity of like, oh no, that is a real pathway. And for the kids who are getting mentored in the 9th and 10th grade at South, you know, to literally get some support and some targeted support from kids who have walked that pathway and kind of show you the way to like avoid some of the snares and to, you know, to take advantage of the supports that are going to be the most helpful.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that our DLS students have gone to Bigelow and Day as well to some of the elementary schools on the north side. And I think to inspire younger students that they can achieve at a high level, I think is just the clear impact that these programs are having. So from the school side, I want to thank you all, thank our panelists. You were amazing. Really, really excellent answers. I want to give a shout out to our one and only student, Maya. Great work. Thanks so much for joining us. It is always impressive to hear our students crushing it like you did. And so I want to pass it over to Jacqueline. I think he was going to close us out. Thank you so much, FORJ, Newton South FORJ and Newton North FORJ for hosting us tonight.
Hi, everyone. I echo Henry's thanks for participating tonight. Dr. Turner and Ms. Stras, your leadership is really key, and we all appreciate that. And to faculty, wow, this is just very impressive. Couldn't be more pleased that our son is attending Newton North and is benefiting from these values and concepts that you're, you know, touting, you're representing. So thank you. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Maya. Wow, if you're representative of the students at North and South, then we are definitely on the right track. Thank you to all of you participants. If you have information that you would like to learn more about FORJ, more about the issues we're talking about, I will post our website and our Facebook page in the chat, as well as a link to resources that we have on our website specifically about equity and excellence. And also just a shout out to an upcoming event. We will be planning something for Juneteenth, and we'd love your help. If you're interested or know people who might be, give us a holler. Let me put up the contact information. All right, that should do it. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great evening.
Bye, everybody. Thank
you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Great job.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.